Material variance, let's stay in that same area. Material variance is another one where, depending on the type of production or manufacturing you're doing or construction, maybe you don't break things. Maybe you don't have defects, but that material variance is, again, it says I need one. I use three of them. Big spike in the curve where now my material cost is 300% of expected. Why?
Growing a business requires a holistic approach that extends beyond sales and marketing. This approach needs alignment among people, processes, and technologies. So if you're a business owner, operations, or finance leader looking to learn growth strategies from your peers and competitors, you're tuned into the right podcast. Welcome to the WBS Podcast, where scalable growth using business systems is our number one priority. Now, here is your host, Sam Gupta.
Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of the WBS Podcast. I'm Sam Gupta, your host and principal consultant at the independent ERP and digital transformation consulting firm Elevate IQ. Most companies may not have a dedicated role for a production manager, and sometimes that might be shared with the business or operations manager. The role might also differ in various industries where most manufacturing companies are likely to have a dedicated production manager role. The production manager might also overlap with quality managers, with their primary responsibility being managing production, managing a schedule, and getting the max out from the production floor. So which KPIs are most critical for the production manager role? In today's episode, we invited a panel of cross-functional experts for a live interview on LinkedIn who brings significant expertise to discuss the top KPIs for production managers. We discussed how the role of production manager could drive their KPIs. We also discussed several industries where production may be relevant. With that, let's get to the conversation. Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's show. And if you are joining for the first time, this is part of our digital transformation series for which we meet every Thursday at 5:30 p.m. Eastern. We pick one topic related to digital transformation for today. We are talking about KPIs for production managers. So we are going to live in the world of manufacturing a lot. I don't know if any other industries are going to have production, but we'll find out. Before we do that, we are going to start with everybody's intros. I am going to start with my intro. If you don't know me, Sam Gupta, principal at Elevate IQ. Elevate IQ is the independent ERP and digital transformation consulting firm. On that note, I am going to move to Chris for his intro.
Thanks, Sam. Chris Chiaradini, president and owner of Turnkey Technologies. I've been in the ERP industry for about 35 years. Again, we focus on the Microsoft Dynamics platform. 56% of our clients are manufacturing, so lots of KPIs. Glad to be here.
Amazing. Thank you so much for being here, Chris. Abu, can I ask you to introduce yourself next?
Sure. Thanks, Sam. My name is Abu, and I'm founder and president at Pani Management Tech Corp. So we are a Sage X3 partner for the last 12 years, and we serve a lot of manufacturing industry, from chemicals to just general equipment manufacturing. So excited to be on this panel.
Okay, amazing. Thank you so much for being here, Abu. And today, guys, I'm going clockwise, so I have to skip myself, and I'm moving to Paul. Paul, would you like to introduce yourself?
Okay.
We did.
Paul Vregel on large process and operating change, and buy into change in a day, implementation, and rapid achievement of results.
Okay, amazing. Thank you so much for being here, Paul. And Paul, you may want to turn off your video. I think you did the smart thing because the internet does not seem to be great. On that note, thank you so much for being here. Mike, do you want to introduce yourself next?
Yeah, thanks, Sam, for having me back again. My name is Mike Schlagenhoff. I've been in manufacturing since 1979, so that's 44 years this September. Currently, I work as a manufacturing consultant for an insurance carrier. We protect about 7,700 manufacturing, and my role is go in there and help them make their business better. And you ask them what they measure on their KPIs, and they give you the deer on the headlight look, and you have a lot of work cut out. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it definitely is. Thank you so much for being here, Mike. And I have stopped mentioning how long I have been in the industry because it's almost embarrassing when I say 20 years. It's almost, it sounds like rookie. Dave, do you want to introduce yourself next?
Yeah. Hey, everyone. My name is Dave Griffith. I run a company called Kaplan Solutions. I will not talk about how long I've been in the industry for similar reasons to Sam. We help companies, almost exclusively manufacturing and industrial companies, go and understand the operational technology and the people part of the process to find breakthrough results quickly.
Okay, amazing. Thank you so much for being here, Dave. So, Chris, today we are talking about production managers. So, obviously, we definitely want to talk about if you have seen production managers anywhere else. I know production could mean a lot of different things, and I have seen even the software companies using the term production because obviously they manufacture as well. Not sure if they go through the same manufacturing process, but some people might perceive that as production as well. So maybe we want to talk about different industries.
Nomenclature.
Exactly. Let's set the stage, let's set the context, and then let's talk about KPI. So Chris,
It's interesting. It's a great point. I had a guy today goes, "You have experience in construction." I go, "You mean making things?" So, did I just oversimplify the term construction? And for
yeah,
anybody in the construction industry, we make things. We,
yeah,
we manufacture, we make things. When we do professional services, we make things. Even in IT, we make things. So production is a great term. It is a little more general, but think about it, is manufacturing and production the same? Subset, superset? Anyway, in the end of the day, the concept of making things, right? And I think that is we look at what do we measure, and I came up with the macro terms, and I'm like, all right, we're always measuring efficiencies, accuracy, throughput, output, throughput. I don't know if they're the same. Capacity, variance. Those are the things we're always okay. And where do we want to measure each of those in different categories? And in volume, maybe volume's another one that I put in there because if I'm the manufacturer is, but again, let's pick a couple. And manufacturing. Let's talk about production manufacturing. But even in any production, what's my capacity? And the question is you look at how do I measure capacity? And again, the other part of what we're measuring is demand. And okay, demand and capacity. And if this much capacity, how long does it take to deliver the demand? Okay, and so then I'm going to focus on that little group right there because it's huge. And companies are like, okay, well, what's capacity? Well, is it based on machines? Is it based on people? Is it based on machine people and available inventory in the next 7 days? So as you think about defining capacity, it varies because in my world, professional services, we don't have equipment, we have people. Okay, but each person has an efficiency on it. So now we're adding efficiency to the capacity calculation because that machine has an 80% efficiency. Well, that worker's got a 43% efficiency, whatever you want to call it. So capacity, efficiency, people, equipment. But again, in the end of the day, how does capacity define what? It defines, okay, units can I make? To define my profit per hour. Well, that's an important one. Can I turn around and sort that by the stuff I'm making and the highest profit per hour? So now you've got a huge return on effort. But again, we're still talking about capacity. So measuring capacity demand. And where are the variables? Well, how do I increase capacity? So meaning if demand increases and I'm the planner and I'm looking at, well, now my delivery cycle, takes me 10 weeks to deliver. Okay, I got to be at 6. We don't want to get rid of demand, so we have to manage capacity. So how do I manage capacity? Back to machines, people. Oh, I'm going to add a shift. I'm going to add 2 hours. Everybody's going to work from 8 to 10. So again, even in this little model here, and I've got an analytics, and so we've got current state. Now what some of the stuff I'm talking about is simulation. I had that term come up today for a project we're going to do, and they're like, can you run simulations on master planning? This is what ifs. What if I have to make 50 drones and I have 9 months? How much capacity do I need? Can you imagine the system say, well, you need 73 people, you need 14 more work centers, you need to work a 14-hour shift 6 days a week. Okay, that's a simulation. So current state, capacity, and again, in the operation guy, he's trying to manage to that. And what's the variance? Well, I'm not at capacity. I'm missing my capacity. How much room do I have to sell more stuff? So again, I can talk a lot right in this little sphere. I try to stay off the other topics gents is covered too. I'll leave it at that for starters.
Yeah, so amazing start. And by the way, my clockwise simulation model is not going to work just because Paul disappeared and came back. But maybe I still have the clockwise. By the way, Chris, on construction, if you're going to say you make things, then you are fired because they don't make things, they construct.
It's all semantics. It's
I
terminology.
know, right?
Yeah. But you don't want to hurt anybody's feelings either, right? So
Exactly. But I mean, honestly speaking, when I look at, and you're absolutely right. If you look at some of the construction verticals, they are kind of manufacturing, but they are not manufacturing because they do accounting differently. So it's kind of different. But yeah, I mean, I get your point. And Dave is going to be so mad today, okay? Because we mixed up output and throughput, and I'm pretty sure Dave is going to have
Couldn't resist. I didn't define it. I didn't go there. Anyway.
So the follow-up question I'm going to have for you, Chris, is I don't know, see if you want to touch a little bit more on the KPIs. I know you talked about a lot of different KPIs in terms of capacity and demand and how you are doing the scenario building. But, for the production managers, let's say they are starting for the first time, which are some of the KPIs that they should be paying attention to?
Let's just start with the basic capacity, right? If I'm living on work centers and I have one operator per worker, and my world is defined based on work centers and uptime and efficiency, then we start with the Excel sheet. We start looking at, okay, let's get every work center in there, and there's some components as to what kind of jobs, and then there's some analysis of job loading. But certainly you're looking at the capacities. If you're running an 8-hour shift machine, it's a simple metric. It's hours, machines. You may program in some maintenance component there to kind of come up with a macro capacity. That's the beginning step. It's remedial, but that's the crawl, walk, run. But you start with basic capacity. Now I've got an operator who can run 2 machines. Okay, all right. We're adding complexity. But again, you start basic. We're looking at work centers. We're looking at hours. And that, in essence, for most manufacturers that are grinding stuff out, their machines define how much they can effectively. They're having labor. So again, you start there. And then do we have people-based work centers? We kind of can expand capacity. So I manage capacity for an ERP practice the same way. It's a list of people, and it's a matrix and clients and projects. And we're looking at what's the macro capacity. And then as you labor load in, what's the available capacity? But that's the starting points for a production. And again, what's he trying to do? A week out. I want to make sure I maximize my utilization of that capacity. But that's the basic.
Amazing insights here. Thank you so much, Chris, for that. So, Abu, I'm coming over to you. And I know in some of the previous sessions when Chris used to talk and he had a story related to pits. I don't know whether you guys remember or not. Okay. And he actually spoke about manufacturing there. Okay. So that was a real manufacturing. So you work in the agriculture space. Now, agriculture space could be very tricky as well, right? Agriculture, food and beverage. So I don't know whether you are going to call that manufacturing, because even agriculture could be called as manufacturing. So I don't know where you draw the lines. Abu, over to you. What you have seen from the production perspective.
I think that if you're making something, that's manufacturing, right? I mean, even construction is project manufacturing, right? You're doing a specific make to order construction, right? So it does take a lot of elements from everything, right? Even in the agriculture space, it's manufacturing. You're growing something, right? It's a different processes and methods around it, but ultimately you have raw material, which is the seed, and you are doing a lot of activities, feeding it, you're fertilizing it, you're putting in nutrients, you're trimming, you're pruning, you're doing all of that, and then you're doing a lot of labor operation, and you have a final product at the end. The way the steps that are involved in it probably are a bit different than your standard typical manufacturing, but there's also a lot of similarities from a manufacturing perspective, and they do borrow a lot of those similar concepts, similar, but more focused on the industrial niches, for example. But they are similar in some aspects for sure. To be called generally manufacturing, right? That's my opinion. From a KPI perspective, I think it's everything varies. Varies by the industry, but I think some of them are fairly common, unique across fairly common across the industry, like cost per piece or cost per especially where you're making something like units rather than you're doing engineered water or construction kind of projects. If you're making individual units, whether it's agriculture or whether it's industrial equipment or something else, cost would be one key component, right? As a production manager, making sure that you're on top of your costs. Other factors which are different, the food and beverage yield is a very important KPI that manufacturers track. You're using 100 kilograms of peanuts. How much peanut bars did you make at the end, right? So their wastage is a big thing, right? So if you're wasting 10% of your raw material of your food product, that's a big cost that you can drive down and reduce. Similarly, it also applies in in the steel industry, for example. right? Where they're cutting steel plates and so on. Again, yield becomes very important over there as well. You have whole software which would optimize plate cutting and all of that for you, right? So yield and wastage be two important KPIs. Chris talked a lot about capacity, so I think that again, how much idle time do you have? Like if you have, are your work centers like peaked where you do not have enough to produce, but now they're also idle a lot of times, right? So what's the utilization rate of the work center? What's the are you becoming short on order? Are you not able to manufacture when you need them, and then you're hitting peak? So all of those factors from a production perspective.
Yeah, very interesting insights. And when you say, everything is manufacturing, that reminds me of the Workday ad. I don't know whether you guys have seen that or not. The Rockstar one. Okay, so in that they have these HR guys and they are talking about how everybody is a rock star. But then when there is going to be a real rock star, they sort of struggle uh, calling them a rock star. Okay, so that's what you are doing here, right? I mean, see, if everything is manufacturing, sometimes that could get very difficult, right? I'm going to claim that this is also manufacturing, whatever I'm doing here. Event could be manufacturing, but no, 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 this is not
It's a different
manufacturing.
kind. I mean, it's a high level, right? I mean, then you get into those niches, and then everything becomes different, right? But at a very high level, even IT is manufacturing, right? You're doing an IT project, you're doing an implementation. It's still, what Chris said, utilizing your resources, project planning, cost, everything.
Yeah, could not agree more. And I think Dave is going to say that's how accountants are going to think. For them, everything is manufacturing, but everything is not manufacturing. Good insight, Abu. So I'm coming over to you, Paul. And from your experience, whatever KPIs you have seen working for the production managers, if you want to talk about that, Paul.
So I mean, there's a standard list. What's your production volume? What are you doing in terms of quality performance? You certainly want to see that. A lot of people they look at internal quality metrics, and somehow that the customer metrics don't make it back in. So looking at PPMs that in automotive, for example, that the customer is seeing, those need to be part of that production manager's information, part of the metrics. Waste and scrap, of course. A lot of things related to employees, absenteeism and cross training, retirements, new hires, maintenance, what's planned, what's unplanned, and what are you actually tracking there, and where's that information coming from? So a lot of that information might be somebody sitting there with some electronic system tracking things, and they're not really getting the true story, which is known by the operator who's on the machine and who knows this is what happened at that point. So KPIs, you can also get into some complications and demotivating behaviors based on the KPIs that you're setting up. If the operators don't see that is realistic, then you end up with one of these daily huddles, and everybody's looking around at each other and saying, "Well, that data doesn't really reflect what what we see here." So, but maybe the system is set up so that somebody is getting paid based on that metric, and then system distorts itself to maximize that metric at the expense of others. Certainly, waste and scrap are important metrics, and inventory levels, especially in terms of production, making anything related to stockouts or material in stock that's past whatever validity dates that it has, especially in, for instance, chemical manufacturing. So those are all metrics that I think are. I mean, it's a whole, as Chris has said, it's a whole soup. It's a whole soup of things, and which of those metrics are going to dominate depends on the characteristics of your business.
Yeah, could not agree more, Paul. And honestly speaking, I think in my experience, the biggest challenge, and you guys can tell me whether you guys agree with me on this point or not, the biggest challenge for production managers is always going to be that human input anytime, because you are running very, very, very expensive machines. You are trying to maintain the production schedule. In our industry, typically, we don't have problem of absenteeism. But you mentioned that in manufacturing, that is definitely going to be there. In our case, I mean, when we are going to have predictable vacations, I know Chris does not like it. Okay, he's always thinking that these guys are always off. I don't know when they work, and I'm actually trying to manage project here, and I just cannot do that. Okay, so it's very, very, very hard. And when you are going to have absenteeism, I don't know how you manage that, to be honest. Personally, I struggle a lot, and I end up working a lot more for my employees in general. That's how it goes. So I don't know, Paul, what you have seen in terms of how you manage the employee-related KPI.
Well, I'll, I'll give an example. Came into a company, and they had just an abysmal chronic absenteeism. Part of that was driven by a command and control structure. So if something happened, their first response was, who did it? Now let's find them and let's train them and fix them. I mean, that literally was their response. And it was a business that depended on teams working together, and the teams had their own kind of individual codes for doing things. Well, you take one person out of that team, you put another person in, and instead of in addition to chronic absenteeism, you have chronic non-conforming delivery of parts because the information transfer isn't there. So the answer to that was they did it very, very badly. They didn't have that, and what we had to do was actually change the whole system, the whole management system. So we started by, let's go right after understanding what the real process is, as opposed to let's find fault and crucify the people who did something. And that change, working with the employees and listening to the issues that they had, how things actually worked, and then fixing as we went, literally changed the work environment so that people who would ordinarily have called and said, "Oh, my car didn't start," they ended up with record numbers of perfect attendance. So I guess the short answer is fix the system in which people work. Create an environment that is safe for change and that people are improvement seeking. So you've changed the whole motivation of the workforce. I came in about 2 months after we finished this engagement, and people were literally grabbing me and showing what they had done, because the new order of things was, what's the process there? How does it work? Do we understand that? And all the things that derived from that. And the last thing on the list was somebody made a mistake or they didn't get trained. So that personnel issue, as you rightly point out, it was absolutely right at the core of the productivity and the accuracy of the company, of what they were delivering to the customer.
Yeah, could not agree more. Thank you so much, Paul, for that. So, Mike, I'm coming over to you, and I don't know what your style is, to be honest, in terms of managing. My style always is going to be command and control and crucifying. That's far more fun than anything else, right? But in terms of KPIs, and I know that, I mean, we have discussed a lot of different KPIs, but I don't know if people really understand what they each mean and what is going to be the impact of each of those. So maybe pick some of them and describe what they really mean, how they impact different industries. Mike, over to you.
So as a production manager, I think you need to identify who your customers, because depending on your organization, do I directly deal with the end user or not, right? But I think Paul mentioned that, and Chris. So my quality manager or my quality department is a customer for me, because I have to make good widgets, right? So first I would start with identify who are your customers, right? And then one of the metrics is, I think that's very valuable is, and I think Chris touched on this, product per labor hour. Because you can hire 100 people to make this, and 6 months later you're out of business. So you need to understand what who your customer is, and then what are they looking for? Do they looking for quality parts? Your master scheduler really doesn't care your quality part. He's more interested, does the product make it to the end user, right? Your inventory manager is more concerned about, do I have enough here to make the shipment tomorrow, right? So everybody has, excuse me, everybody has different demands. So as a production manager, I think you're in the middle. Last week we talked about the operations. So he's probably your boss, right? So what do those people want, and how do I get it there? And I think one of the key things to understand is that, I hate to say this, but production makes us money, right? Yes, engineers in the office, they don't add any money. So that indicator of value added per labor hour or product per labor hour, how did I turn the inputs that Chris talked about? How do I turn the raw material, my machine capacity, and my human efforts, labor force, into the product to add value? And that's a pretty tough one to put metrics in there on KPIs, because you said if you have a disgruntled workforce that Paul just mentioned, yeah, we made 100 widgets, but 50 of them we have to throw away, right? So now your inputs and your outputs are impacted by that. Plus, you have a workforce that is very negative and probably not open to changes or to help you to win the daily battle. So you asked before, you said you like the control and command leadership style, right? I come out of the lean manufacturing. I believe in a culture and a company of employee empowerment. That doesn't mean we give the keys of the insane asylum to the asylum, right? That's not what that means. But that means is, for example, a simple tool like the Gemba walk. I think it was mentioned here by go out, find out what it is. Yeah, the data says we have a deficiency in this work center. And Jim told me this, the old telephone, we whisper everything in the ear by the time it gets, it's 4 o'clock, it's go home time, right? So I think simple tools like this, and have the people empowered, the open door policy, we hear it, but seriously, I think my door at my last manufacturing job was never closed. I think the hinges rusted shut, and have them come in, sit down, what's the problem, go out there, see there for yourself, and then based on this, involve the people to solve the problem. I think Paul said that when he came in 2 months later, they all showed him what they did, how they accomplished. And I think if you create an environment like this, you have a teamwork that's pushing for the same goals. Now, as a production manager, to direct all of those people, I think, to those KPIs, to those goals, because before I said the quality guy wants 99.9% first time pass rate. The inventory manager wants 100% on time delivery, and your boss wants 27% profitability, right? So you need to figure this out to get this together. And I think a lot of times what we're looking in there, that people attack only one of those things. They leave the human factor over here and the equipment factor over here, and they don't combine that, and they have two forces fighting each other. Does that kind of make sense when you ask me? By the way, I do have a whip in my office, so I do like to control and command too.
By the way, Mike, do you want to know how to create a disgruntled worker?
Yeah.
We have a production manager sitting right here in the room, and you are talking about operations manager being the boss of the production manager. And I know Dave is going to be so mad. He's probably going to throw a manufacturing grenade today, okay? But you know what? The question I'm going to have for you is, obviously when you get into these conflicts, I know that Paul probably spoke about the costing, the interaction between different parties. Costing is obviously going to be very important. But when you look at cost, okay, cost goes through a lot of different layers. It has to go through a lot of different departments. And when your, let's say, operations manager or the inventory manager is not going to be happy with you, the numbers are going to be all over the place, I guess. So you really need to know how to work with them, I guess, right? Otherwise, your KPIs are going to be all over the place. So I don't know if you have any other insights in terms of the KPIs that are going to be slightly more cross-functional for production management. Mike,
To
over to
me,
you.
I mentioned it before. I think that the value add, and you can do this in different ways, is, input in at the dollar value. We took 6 bolts, 4 pounds of steel, machine time cost this and this. So I added labor cost. I added, we call it burden. That goes all into those fixed costs that even my engineers that don't add value to the product because they don't produce anything. That goes in. So I have all of those costs coming in, and then I target the CFO's target of profitability. And to match that, I think you need, like you said, you need to understand those, and you need to literally go out when you have those. How do they impact? And that's where I think the production manager and the operations manager work hand in hand. Even if he's my boss, because I used to be a production man and I became an operations man. I think they need to really understand each other, the language that this, because if he speaks this and I interpret this, production and operations is not going to work together. So to answer, I think one of the key things is and we talked about this before, throughput and inputs and all of this. I think the easiest way to explain that is you need to put production. This is a struggle a little bit. We need to put production in the center of the operations because all the other inputs, quality, which controls me, but they need to be part of the solution. So just rejecting my parts doesn't work. They need to be part of this and say, hey, we're finding out work center 6 has an issue. Work center 7, which does the same operation, doesn't have that issue. So they need to help me to break those deltas between my KPIs down and bring me the information back and say, hey, every time second shift comes in, your output goes up, but your quality goes down. We can provide that data. We can analyze that for you. And then it's my job as the production manager to put the right resources on the departments together. When I was a lean implementation manager, one of the things we measured is improvement ideas per employee. So that's why I go back to the culture that you have is make the people part of the solution. And I think Paul said that coming back 2 months later, and he has all friends suddenly because when he walked in first, they didn't like him. But they thought he's going to cut all our jobs, right? But when he came in back 2 months later, so to me, I think production managers is not just a technical job; it's a very people oriented. You need to know what makes your people trigger to do what you need them to do without using the way.
Could not agree more. Thank you so much, Mike, for that.
Yep.
And Dave, I don't know how you are feeling at this point of time. Mike did try to make up towards the end because he did say that production needs to be at the center of everything, right? But in the beginning, he did say that he had a whip, right? So I don't know how you are feeling at this point of time, and with whip, how you are going to feel overall about the KPIs because you are probably not going to care for any of them.
Well, Sam, one thing I can tell you is I basically blacked out right after the point that Mike said he's a people-centric leader, but he's also got a whip. And then between you and Chris and Mike, I don't really know what happened for the last 5 minutes of my life. But what I would agree with Mike, with Paul, with everyone, is that a production manager is probably like 50% therapist and probably like 50% machine whisperer. Right? Like if you are going to go run production in a manufacturing facility, you have to understand people. You have to make sure that you can have properly trained people, however we want to train them. And I feel like we could have a more than 60-minute debate upon the correct way to train them. But we have to have properly trained people with some amount of experience who regularly show up for their shifts in order to go run machines that are hopefully well taken care of. And we have the product that we need to go run what is scheduled. So I would say that a production manager, especially if they're running just production and they're running 3 to 5 shifts and they don't own operation, maybe they don't own the entire facility, is probably one of the most stressful jobs because they're not human resources, but they are in the middle of trying to make sure everyone shows up on time. And we had talked about what happens when people don't show up with truancy and whatnot. I would say in some of the best organizations I've worked with, we assume that there is some number of people who aren't going to show up, and we've got extra people scheduled. In a more realistic, good opportunity, we know some people aren't going to show up, so we've got 2 or 3 floaters, maybe in management, maybe in a leadership role, who are regularly going to go out and work the line or the lines because that's where they've come through. And in a lot of other instances, we've got a production manager or a general manager or someone who's got to go run whatever we're running through the line because we are missing 2 or 3 or 5 people, and we're going to go run around the whole shift and try to keep the line or try to keep the work cells up. I would say kind of beyond that, I want to thank Chris and Abu, right? So Chris was talking about how construction is manufacturing, and Abu was talking about how big ag was manufacturing. And guys, like there was a period of time in my life where I struggled defining the difference between manufacturing and other industrial applications. I think that this is my example. Like forevermore, I now have a clear delineation of manufacturing and other industrial applications. And for probably 80+% of what we're talking about. The processes are all the same. In many instances, though, I don't know any big ag or construction company who would really like to hear that they're the same as the manufacturing the manufacturing company down the road. So thank you guys for that. That is a story that I will probably get 1,000 laughs at over the course of the next 6 months. Going back to some of the KPIs, right? I think that it's important to drill down on KPIs, and I think it's important to talk about how large the organization is. And I think Chris brought up a really good point, right? So he's talking about simulation, and I love and simulation is, hey, I need to go make 500 of these work cell widgets over the course of the next 6 months. How do I do it? What I've learned living in that production role is it's not a linear scalability, right? If I've got 5 people working, I can't go at 10 people and assume we're going to go double what our output or throughput, and we won't get into the debate of output versus throughput. I would hope in this instance they're the same thing. I worked with a company a year or a couple of years ago who, before I got there, they're like, hey, we're running 10,000 widgets a month. 10,000 widgets a month is really good. We would like is not linear when it comes to that, but I think I froze out. Can you guys hear me?
Yeah, now you are back, I guess.
Okay.
David. Yeah,
Okay.
Go on, please. Yeah.
So I was saying scalability is not linear. So as I look at kind of top KPIs for production, I like throughput. Right. So throughput generally lets us know how much we're running through. Hopefully, if that throughput comes down, we'll know that we'll have yield, quality, or production or other issues. I would say as well, kind of downtime. Right. So we know based upon throughput and what our downtime or perhaps OEE looks like, generally how we're running. We know if we're taking lots of downtime, like hopefully we will have an operator code of, hey, we did not have enough people to go run this shift, and that can lead us back to truancy. That can lead us back to, hey, we've got a bunch of quality problems. And then I like looking at orders shipped versus expected orders, right? So we know what was on track, and then that can lead back to, hey, can we run the production schedule that we're looking for? Do we have the raw materials in? Do we have the orders? And if I had to pick 3, I would say that those 3 are 3 of my favorite to look at. And hopefully we're able to go correlate kind of the human aspect, the machine aspect, and everything else based upon those.
Okay, amazing insights there. Thank you so much, Dave, for that. So, Chris, I'm coming over to you, and today internet is acting like our attention span. Sometimes we have, sometimes we don't. So for you, I guess, I mean, since we have just 20 minutes, we'll probably move quickly. And you are touching on any specific KPIs that you want to pick on. And I don't know, again, the goal here is going to be, I know we have mentioned a lot of them, but I don't know if all production managers are really going to understand what they mean, how they really
behind them. Sure.
Exactly. So describe some maybe story or examples.
We'll use an example. And let's talk about labor variance. Okay. Yeah. And so what that means is where we have bill of materials and we define a routing and we have operations, and each operation has a standard labor rate. That operation is 2 hours. Great. The guys over there clocking, labor variance, where we're looking at on a production. We do micro, macro. Micro means I'm looking at the variance on one single production order. Macro means I'm looking at the variance, the period overall production. So, and at the top level, you may say, oh, there's no variance. But at a micro level, we may say, oh, well, we've got positives and negatives. And so, but variance, again, is if the standard is 2 hours, it took him 3.5. Why? And so the analytics, the business intelligence, the KPIs, key performance indicators, you want to see that variance and say, what happened on this particular manufacturing order? And again, there's the example of the variance on labor, standard labor. And why is that a problem? Well, because the product costs more now. And again, the guy priced it with an assumption. So again, all of a sudden I got more cost. That's a problem because the sales guys are going to say, what happened to my margin? I thought I had 30%. I have 2%. Well, my guys are working slow. And again, real labor. So that's a great example. Material variance, let's stay in that same area. Material variance is another one where, depending on the type of production or manufacturing you're doing or construction, maybe you don't break things. Maybe you don't have defects. But that material variance is, again, it says I need 1. I use 3 of them. Big spike in the curve where now my material cost is 300% of expected. Why? And so again, as we're looking at variances, we've got standards, and in most stuff, it's pretty, some companies, they'll backflush most of the components. Why? Because I don't need to count it. I know I use 1. They never break. They're always good. but there may be other products where, and this probably comes into an efficiency component as well. As you look at material variance, and depending on your manufacturing, I had a client that did glass, so they extruded glass for IV bottles, real little teeny, you know how fragile. Well, they had a 250% efficiency. I mean, that means they have to use 2.5 pounds to make 1 pound of goods. So again, there's a perfect example where, what's that variance on that material consumption? Because in the end of the day, the price assumes a certain material cost, and again, that variance. So there's the two real examples where we're measuring what's the standard, what did I actually use, macro, micro. Again, at a macro level, if we don't have good systems technology, you're counting inventory in the end of the month. You're like, hey, we're missing a bunch of stuff. Well, most manufacturing systems allow you to issue additional inventory. It puts more cost into work and process. So anyway, there are a couple of good examples.
Yeah, great examples. And I'm going to have just one follow-up question for you, Chris, and that is going to be back flushing. I don't know, whose back are we flushing?
So back flushing is a technique, and in production and manufacturing environments, when we define our bill of materials, there are certain products where we can say, oh, I know I'm going to use that exactly, and I can consume those either at the beginning of the process or the end of the. This really depends on when you want to see it leave inventory, because even at the end of the process, it's allocated, it's not available. So back flush means consume the standard quantity. You don't have an operator collecting data. But you can mix, which means in a single bill of material, maybe 9 of my 10 components, I backflush them. But this 10th one, it's gold bullion, which means we're going to get real precise, or maybe it's a very expensive chemical. I've got an example of a guy that was grinding body parts out of a piece of plastic. 1 inch was $5,000 in plastic. So they're very, very meticulous about measuring grams of that plastic because it can dramatically change the product. There's the example on backflush. It means I don't count it when I consume it. When I issue it, I'm literally counting it. Did I need to issue more? What happened? I spilled it. Defect. There's a lot of reasons you may have to go back to the.
Amazing insight there. Thank you so much, Chris, for that. So, Abu, I'm coming over to you. And by the way, grinding body parts is not man. Abu, so
we're making new body parts, and it is manufacturing. Even if we're growing stuff to make tissue, it's manufacturing.
Okay, Abu, so we are looking for any examples that you might have, very specific examples in terms of KPIs, in description of those, I guess, if people might not understand.
Yeah, I mean, grinding body parts is disassembly, right? So still
disassembly. See? Technical people.
Yeah, I think, one of the key, Chris talked a lot about, variance, and when you look at variance, it will drive a lot of things, right? Cost, you look at scheduling. If your cost is too high, that should, start an analysis and point out a lot of different factors. One other key factor would be how much did you make, in a predefined time, right? So if you're a chemical manufacturer, how many liters of chemical did you make in a shift, in a batch, in a day? That's a very key component KPI for most industries. We're doing developing a KPI recently for a manufacturing firm, which is wants to measure how much their packing line is producing every shift. Right? This is their goal. This is how much they pack, and then they want to measure each and every how much each personnel packed in their shift. Right. So production efficiency, in my opinion, would be a key KPI. Right. What's your planned production and how much did you actually make? And that's where a lot of companies would lose out or would drive a lot of other information you can further analyze. So in my opinion, cost, tracking cost per unit, per liter, or whatever that you're doing, and then how much you are actually making would be the two the strongest KPIs that you'd be tracking, in my opinion.
Okay, very interesting insights there. So, Abu, I'm going to have slightly more technical ERP-like question for you, because sometimes when you look at these things, especially from the production manager perspective, even for ERP consultants, these things could be very confusing. When you look at MPS versus forecast versus MRP and what is driving demand and when to use what. So let's say if you were the production manager and you were trying to figure out, okay, should this go as my MPS? So maybe describe these terms a little bit and how they sort of affect the production planning.
So MPS would be like a master production schedule. So your production scheduling is defining how much raw materials that you need, right? Material requirement planning is you're taking an input point of view, how much safety stock you have, how much is getting consumed. So So two different ways of looking at it and probably trying to get to the same end result, that is to have enough of what is in stock and and you have it when you really need it. MRP would be where you have a lot of movement in the raw materials, where they're not necessarily tied to a specific end product. That's where you'd be using MRP for those, and then MPS would be more the end product, the manufacturing product driven method of planning. Forecasting then again becomes complicated, right? Forecasting is sales. Can be seasonal forecast. Maybe you're making more during Christmas season, right? You're making products which are more suited to that season, and then you have a drop in demand. You're making ice cream, for example, goes up in summer, then slows down. So that would be seasonal forecast again, right? And then that can also get affected, right? So if your sales is running a promotion, that is going to affect forecast. And then that forecast is going to define how much you need, how much raw material you need, and then how much end product that you need. So at the end, they all have their plus and minuses, but you're trying to predict how much how manufacture, so that you don't have too much inventory sitting, and you have the raw material when you need.
Yeah, great insights. Thank you so much, Abu, for that. Paul, I'm coming over to you. Any KPIs that you want to touch on in slightly more detail?
Uh, I'm going to broaden the base and generalize, if you will. I think the key thing is really understand what your business actually is, and make sure that any of the data that you're getting is representative of what you really need, both in source and quality. I mean, those two things derail more KPI driven systems than any that I have seen. They just there's people try to collect data in Excel and then aggregate on top of that, and somebody calls the product one name, somebody calls it a different name, and the data doesn't in fact match what reality is. And I would say in terms of KPIs, that's the critical element. What is the real data that you are looking at, and is that the data that matters for your business, and are you actually looking at the real data, not things collected at a different level or in a different place, and you're making decisions based on bad information. It's a universal curse. So I mean the KPIs, it really all depends on your business. Chemical business is different than a discrete parts business. Is different than a construction business, even if it has manufacturing pieces as part of the construction. So there can be many different kinds of KPIs that are critical for your business, but make sure that you're going after you have the real data that you need. That's important for you.
Yeah, could not agree more. Figure out what you want to fight for before you start fighting. Thank you so much, Paul, for that.
There you go. Well said.
Mike, coming over to you, and I don't know, I mean, see if you are going to peel into any specific KPIs. If you have a production manager who's not going to be as smart as you guys, then you need to break it down for them. So pick a couple of KPIs and then just describe them.
One of my favorite was when we talked about the human factor in making product was always labor cost per part. And why I looked at that was because we might make the parts and we made the right number of parts, but we put more labor on, because most of my production labor was hourly. So any change in that labor shows up, versus on salary, you get paid for results, and if you have to be there 40 hours or 100 hours, doesn't matter. Your check hasn't changed. So, but that indicated to me a lot of times why I looked at that very. Why did we run overtime to get this product out? Which can indicate so many other factors underneath. We talked about attendance issues, right? Truancies, right? Did people come up? We talked about the utilization of the productivity, the efficiency of the person in it. So when I need suddenly 15 hours to make something, and I need to bring people in on time and a half, that shows immediately up. That's one reason why I liked it. And I have to say, to my own defense, I worked in an environment back then where we had preventative. So our downtime really didn't come off the machines, because we knew we needed to shut this machine down next Wednesday for 4 hours to do a spindle change. So master scheduling had that in. So they eliminated or reduced the production plan, which was great because then they weren't surprised. So we would go in, we would have a bi-weekly meeting and tell them this is what our maintenance team goes in. So eliminating that out was one of the first goals. And then the next goal was to literally work with our labor costs, saying, why is that so variant? Is it an attendance issue? Is it a turnover issue? What is it? Why suddenly the labor cost on this product? And Chris talked about the bill of the material on the steps. It should take 2 hours, right? Suddenly labor cost goes up. So was it we had to run overtime, or was it we suddenly slowed down? On this the ERP or MRP on MES system that I had, there were codes. On the first code I eliminated when I was a production manager was miscellaneous or all other. Because guess what? That was my biggest category. I said, no, if I have to put 100 codes in there, and I have to give you 100 barcodes to scan the right code, I will do this because all other doesn't tell me what it is. So using my labor cost really was, I used it as a driver to find why did things not happen we wanted them to happen, because our machines were really there was a 5-year process to get our machine downtime to where we literally could predict this machine out of 168 hours, we have it down for 12 hours because we missed this, or it was scheduled down because there was no product. So that wasn't a surprise. But the last thing that and I would encourage everybody to look at their actual labor hour costs and why does it go up, why does it fluctuate for the same process, because it will indicate you, it will drive you to look at underlying costs. So that's my recommendation to a younger or new into the production manager. Yeah, the output, there are so many variables, but if you look at your labor hour, it drives you a lot of times to the root cause, to the why did we needed more resources than we had? Because, your machine sits there, that cost doesn't show up as easily as, Sam has to work 5, 10 hour days now without the whip because he's a nice guy. He just loves to come in, right? Versus normally he works only 40 hours. So that's for me was always
Yeah, Mike, and I'll tell you how I work, to be honest. Okay, so if you are going to give me a task that is going to take 40 hours, okay, but I need to have, let's say, 120 hours, even if in reality that is only going to take 40 hours because I have these anxiety issues, 40. So I don't know how you handle with that, with that. But yeah, I mean, I'm probably going to have a little trouble there for you if I'm going. So Dave, I'm coming over to you.
So just quick, when you have anxiety issues, we promote you. So we promote you out of the position. So where your anxiety issues can be utilized for the good. So that's what I would do.
Then I'm going to be promoted all the time, Mike. Thank you so much. You are so kind.
Promoted to business owner, Sam. Absolutely. So I would like to first dissuade the thought that Sam only works for. I am 100% convinced just on the he and I talk, it far surpasses 40 hours a week. Second, I'd like to suggest to Chris that that the bone sawing podcast or something along that way. I think that could be a new turnkey technologies opportunity right there. I look for maybe 30th anniversary. I don't know. I'm just saying. I think there's opportunities there for you. I kind of want to go to the opposite of Mike's comment. One talking about KPIs. I think labor and understanding labor is really good. I think a really bad KPI for production managers is just looking at raw capacity utilization of machines, unless it is specifically a constraint. Right? So if it is a constraint, so typically in manufacturing, especially if you are in food and beverage, you are filling things. You are almost that filler is the design constraint, right? Like that should be running as close to 100% of the time as we possibly. But if we're in another industry, if we're looking at things like a palletizer or a depalletizer, that is based upon kind of everything else along the line. If we are in a CNC machine shop, we should be focused on good utilization of the machine as opposed to keeping the machine running at 100% of the time. I see lots of people trying to run machines over and over and over again. And that actually just increases our labor hour, it increases our cost. We're probably scrapping a bunch of stuff, and then we're putting a bunch of items and work in progress and in theory in inventory that are costs that we did not need to have.
Okay, amazing insight there. Thank you so much, Dave, for that. And Chris, in my opinion, I think you should consider rebranding because you should call yourself Turn Body Technologies. You're always turning bodies.
It's funny, but the complexity in manufacturing, we've got people doing tissue regeneration, and we've got multiple customers making medical related products, and a lot of them they're replacements. But the guys with the tissue regeneration, it works. But again, you mentioned disassembly, Mike. They bring 70 bodies in the back door and they disassemble. Ooh, that's a touchy one. Hey, what about growing meat? I had another group that grows meat in a manufacturing plant, not animals, but they're growing artificial meat. So manufacturing is a growing. We use the term grow, and I think process versus discrete, right, guys? I think that's really the difference, right? But good stuff. So closing comments.
Yeah.
Find out who owns the KPI. I think that's something we didn't talk about. Who really owns that? Meaning, when it goes awry, who owns it? Who can impact it? As a production manager, I got to call somebody. Because if there's 10 of them and he's watching, hey, I got a red one, who owns it? But I think establishing that on the front end is important so that if something does go awry, we know what the actionable outcome is.
Okay, amazing. Thank you so much, Chris. So we are probably going to do a couple of words. Abu, closing advice, please.
I think based on your industry, identifying the right KPI for your production environment and then tracking it in Aspen set of time and having that feedback loop in place to keep on measuring.
Love it. Thank you so much. Paul, a few words, please.
I'll go with one word.
Yeah, please.
Think.
Love it. Thank you so much, Paul. Mike, a few words, please.
Chris took mine to understand who owns the KPI, but let's say if a KPI doesn't change, go out and find out why it doesn't change. If it stays static, something is wrong.
Okay, amazing. Thank you so much, Mike. Dave, please.
Being a production manager is as much of an art as it is a science. Learn to balance the man in the...
Love it. Thank you so much, guys. So that's it for today. If you joined for the first time, this was part of our digital transformation series for which we meet every Thursday at 5:30 p.m. Eastern. We might have some breaks in between, I guess. I don't know if we are meeting next week, but most likely we are going to be here one of the Thursdays. So make sure you check us out. On that note, thanks everyone for tuning in.
Thanks, group.
Take care, gentlemen. Good seeing you all.
You,
good
everyone.
information. Thanks for sharing.
I cannot thank our guests enough for coming on the show, for sharing their knowledge and journey. I always pick up learnings from our guests, and hopefully you learned something new today. If you want to learn more about Chris Garadini, head over to turnkeytech.com. It's turnkeytech.com. If you want to learn more about Paul Briegel, head over to 4abetterbusiness.com. It's 4abetterbusiness.com. If you want to learn more about Abu Asif, head over to pennymanagement.com. It's PANNIMANAGEMENT.com. If you want to learn more about Mike Slagenhofer, head over to equity.com. It's ACUITY.com. If you want to learn more about Dave Griffith, head over to dave-griffith.com. It's DAVE-GRIFFITH.com. Links and more information will also be available in the show notes. Also, don't forget to subscribe and spread the word among folks with similar backgrounds. If you have any questions or comments about the show, please review and rate us on your favorite podcasting platform or DM me on any social channels. I'll try my best to respond personally and make sure you get help. Thank you, and I hope to catch you on the next episode of the WBS Podcast.
Thank you for listening to another episode of the WBS Podcast. Be sure to subscribe on your favorite podcasting platform so you never miss an episode. For more information on growth strategies for SMBs using ERP and digital transformation, check out our community at WBS.rocks. We'll see you next time.